The day my daughter smiled while strangers admired my living room was the day I realized I had already lost something far more precious than my house. "It's practically sold," Emily said cheerfully, as though I'd agreed to every word. I stood frozen on my own front porch, staring at people discussing where they'd place their furniture. Then the first buyer looked straight at me. His smile vanished. He whispered, "Wait. You're Sylvia Bennett, aren't you?" The room fell silent, and for the first time that afternoon, someone besides me understood that something was terribly, terribly wrong. If this story touches your heart, I'd truly appreciate it if you'd take a moment to like this video. And if you've ever wondered how well we really know the people we love most, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Please also tell me where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Reading your messages always reminds me that none of us walks through life's hardest moments alone. And if you enjoy heartfelt family stories like mine, I'd be honored if you subscribed and joined me for the rest of this journey. My name is Sylvia Bennett, and for 72 years I believed the safest place in the world was inside my own family. Looking back now, I realize betrayal doesn't arrive all at once. It comes quietly. It smiles at you over coffee. It offers to carry your groceries. It tells you it's only trying to help. If someone had warned me years ago that the greatest danger to my future wouldn't be a stranger, but someone I loved more than my own life, I would have laughed. Because I trusted my daughter. Completely. I spent 43 years teaching second grade at Jefferson Elementary, in a small town outside Columbus, Ohio. Children always made sense to me. They cried when they were hurt. They smiled when they felt loved. Their hearts were honest. Adults were different. I retired at 68 after my husband, Robert Bennett, convinced me it was finally time to slow down. "You've spent your whole life taking care of everyone else," he'd tell me every Sunday morning while making pancakes. "Now let someone take care of you." Robert had a way of making ordinary moments feel important. Even after 45 years of marriage, he still reached for my hand whenever we crossed a parking lot. That simple habit disappeared the day he suffered a heart attack while trimming our backyard hedges. One minute, he was waving at me through the kitchen window. 20 minutes later, he was gone. People always say time heals. It doesn't. Time simply teaches you how to carry pain without dropping everything else. The house became unbearably quiet. I caught myself setting 2 plates at dinner. I still bought his favorite coffee. Sometimes I woke up reaching for him before remembering there was only an empty pillow beside me. Emily worried about me. She started visiting every evening after work. At first, those visits saved me. She'd bring takeout from my favorite diner. We'd sit at the kitchen table for hours talking about Robert. Sometimes we'd laugh. Sometimes we'd cry together. I remember thinking how lucky I was. Not everyone grows old with a daughter who genuinely wants to spend time with her mother. "Mom," she said one evening, "you don't have to do everything alone anymore." I smiled. I know. And honestly, some of this online banking stuff is ridiculous. She wasn't wrong. Technology had always confused me. The bank kept asking me to reset passwords. Medical bills arrived by email instead of mail. Every website wanted another username. I kept a little notebook full of passwords that somehow never worked when I needed them. Emily laughed kindly whenever I became frustrated. "I'll handle it," she'd say. "It'll make life easier." It sounded reasonable, so I let her. She helped pay my utility bills online. She organized my doctor's appointments. She ordered groceries. She renewed my prescriptions. Whenever something complicated arrived in the mail, she'd say, "Leave it for me," and I did. For the first time since Robert died, I didn't feel completely alone. My best friend, Margaret Collins, noticed the change. Margaret lived 3 houses down. We'd been neighbors for almost 30 years. She had watched Emily grow up. One afternoon, we were drinking iced tea on my porch when she asked a simple question. So, do you still balance your own checkbook? I laughed. Oh, goodness, no. Emily does all that now. Margaret didn't laugh. Everything? Pretty much. What about your retirement account? Emily checks it. Your property taxes? Emily pays them. Your insurance? Emily keeps track of that too. Margaret became unusually quiet. Finally, she said, Sylvia, don't give away too much. I frowned. What do you mean? I mean, help is wonderful. She paused. But help shouldn't mean giving up control. I smiled, because I honestly thought she was worrying for nothing. You sound like one of those television crime shows. I'm serious. So am I. I reached over and squeezed her hand. Emily loves me. I know she does. Then what are you worried about? Margaret looked toward my front yard before answering. Sometimes people don't start with bad intentions. I laughed again. You've been reading too many mystery novels. She forced a smile, but I noticed it never reached her eyes. The conversation ended there. I didn't think about it again. Months passed. Emily became even more involved in my daily life. If I offered to pay a bill, she'd wave me away. I already took care of it. If I asked about my savings, she'd answer before I finished the question. Everything's fine. If paperwork arrived in the mail, she'd collect it before I even opened the envelope. At the time, it felt comforting. Now I realize I slowly stopped asking questions. Not because I couldn't understand the answers, because I trusted the person giving them. One Saturday morning, Emily stopped by carrying a folder. Mom, I just need a couple of signatures. For what? Oh, nothing exciting. She laughed. Bank authorization, insurance updates, routine stuff. I glanced at the stack. There were several pages. Tiny print covered every line. I probably should read these. You can. She smiled warmly. But honestly, they're exactly what we talked about last week. I tried remembering. I couldn't. Age has a funny way of making you doubt yourself before anyone else ever does. Maybe we had discussed it. Maybe I'd forgotten. Emily noticed my hesitation. You trust me, don't you? That question still echoes in my mind. Not because of what she asked, because of how quickly I answered. Of course I do. I signed every page, without reading a single one. Emily thanked me, hugged me tightly, and left. I never asked where those papers went. A few weeks later, I needed information about one of my accounts. I searched my desk. Nothing. I looked through my filing cabinet. Still nothing. When Emily came over that evening, I mentioned it. Oh, she said casually. I moved everything into digital files. You did. It'll keep things organized. So, where are the paper copies? I shredded them. Something inside me hesitated, only for a second. I guess that makes sense. It absolutely does. She kissed my forehead. You don't need to worry about paperwork anymore. Those words felt comforting then. Today, they sound like a warning. I didn't realize it yet, but little by little, I had stopped managing my own life. Not because someone forced me, because I believed love made questions unnecessary. And that was the biggest mistake I would ever make. As I think back now, I can see dozens of tiny moments that should have made me stop. Margaret's worried expression, the missing paperwork, the documents I signed too quickly, the answers Emily always gave before I finished asking the question. Each one seemed harmless by itself. Together they were building something I couldn't yet see, something that would eventually leave me standing in my own living room, surrounded by strangers, wondering how my home had stopped belonging to me before anyone bothered to tell me. Looking back, I can't point to one day when Emily took control of my life. It happened so slowly that I mistook it for love. The first thing that disappeared was my confidence. The second was my independence. The third was my voice. One Monday morning, I sat down with a cup of coffee and tried to log into my online bank account. I entered my password. Incorrect password. I tried again. Same message. When Emily stopped by that afternoon, I mentioned it. I can't get into my account. Oh, she said without looking up from her phone. I changed the password. You did? You kept getting locked out. Well, what is it now? She smiled. You don't need it. I laughed awkwardly. I'd still like to know. I'll handle everything, Mom. Her answer came so quickly that I didn't push back. I simply nodded. Another tiny piece of my independence slipped away. A few weeks later, I noticed something else. The mailbox was nearly empty. For years, I had received bank statements, insurance notices, retirement updates, and utility bills. Now, there were only advertisements. I asked Emily if the mail had slowed down. She smiled. I switched everything to paperless. Everything. It's better for the environment. That sounded reasonable. Then she added, besides, half the time you never opened those envelopes anyway. She wasn't wrong. Still, something felt strange. I just couldn't explain why. Not long afterward, I received a phone call from my insurance company. The representative asked me to verify my email address. She read an address I had never heard before. I'm sorry, I interrupted. That isn't my email. There was silence. Ma'am, this is the only email we have on file. After hanging up, I called Emily. Oh, that's mine, she explained casually. I updated everything so I wouldn't miss important messages. You probably should have told me. I was going to. She sounded almost offended. I'm trying to help. Immediately, I felt guilty. I'm sorry. Those words came out of my mouth far too often. Not because I had done something wrong, because I hated making Emily feel criticized. Margaret noticed the changes before I did. She came over one afternoon carrying blueberry muffins. We sat in the kitchen just like we had hundreds of times before. So, she asked casually, did you ever find those retirement papers? No. Did Emily, I guess. You guess? I didn't ask. Margaret set her coffee down. Sylvia? Her voice became serious. When was the last time you actually looked at your own bank statement? I searched my memory. I don't know. When was the last time you paid one of your own bills? I frowned. I honestly can't remember. Margaret leaned back. That worries me. It shouldn't. Why not? Because Emily handles everything. She looked straight into my eyes. Exactly. I laughed nervously. You really don't trust anyone. I trust people. She paused. I just don't trust blind trust. I changed the subject. Deep inside, I didn't want to hear what she was saying. Because if Margaret was right, then I had made a terrible mistake. Emily's visits became more frequent. Sometimes she came by every day. She reorganized my filing cabinet. She replaced my checkbook with online payments. She canceled subscriptions I had forgotten about. She even started scheduling repairs around the house. Every decision seemed helpful. Every favor made my life easier. Until one afternoon. I was cleaning my bedroom when I found an unopened envelope behind my dresser. It had slipped through the crack months earlier. The envelope was from my retirement fund. I opened it. Inside was a notice explaining there had been changes made to my account preferences. Someone had updated my contact information. Someone had changed the communication settings. Someone had authorized online-only access. I didn't remember doing any of that. When Emily came over, I showed her the letter. Oh. She barely looked at it. I already handled that. When? Months ago. I don't remember signing anything. You did. She smiled confidently. Remember those forms you signed? I tried to remember. Maybe she was right. There had been so many papers. I suppose? She kissed my cheek. You worry too much. The conversation ended there. But that night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I believed Emily had done something wrong, because I couldn't remember whether she was telling the truth. Growing older plays cruel tricks on your confidence. Every forgotten name, every misplaced pair of glasses, every missed appointment. They make you wonder if your memory is becoming unreliable. So when Emily confidently said, "You signed it," I automatically assumed the problem was me, not her. A month later, I visited my bank to withdraw cash. The young teller smiled politely. "Will you be using your debit card today?" "I don't have one." She looked confused. "Our records show you do." "No." She turned her monitor toward another employee. After a brief conversation, she apologized. "It looks like a replacement card was issued 6 months ago." "I never requested one." She hesitated. "It was mailed to the address we have on file." "What address?" She read Emily's address. I felt my stomach tighten. "I didn't authorize that." The teller suggested I speak with a manager. Before I could, my phone rang. "Emily." "Mom, where are you?" "At the bank." "What are you doing there?" "I needed some cash." "I told you to call me first." Her tone caught me off guard. "I didn't think I needed permission." "You don't," she answered quickly. I already handle those things." I noticed the bank manager watching me. Suddenly, I felt embarrassed. "I'll be home soon." I ended the call. Instead of speaking with the manager, I left. Even now I ask myself why. The answer is painfully simple. I wanted to believe there was an innocent explanation. That evening, Emily arrived carrying groceries. She acted as though nothing had happened. "I bought your favorite soup." I thanked her. During dinner, she chatted about work, about traffic, about the weather. Not once did she mention the bank. Neither did I. Silence became easier than confrontation. Days turned into weeks. One afternoon, I needed a copy of my property tax records. I searched every drawer. Nothing. I searched the office closet. Nothing. When Emily stopped by, I asked where the files were. I scanned them. "Can I have the copies?" "They're stored online." "I'd like to see them." "I'll print them later." She never did. At church the following Sunday, Margaret quietly pulled me aside. "Sylvia." "What?" "I hate saying this." She looked around before lowering her voice. "Are you sure Emily isn't treating you like a child?" I laughed. "I'm 72. "I know. Sometimes I feel like one." Margaret squeezed my hand. "You shouldn't." That sentence stayed with me, because she was right. Somewhere along the way, I had stopped making decisions, stopped asking questions, stopped expecting answers. I had become a guest inside my own financial life. The frightening part wasn't that Emily had taken control. It was that I had handed it to her one signature, one password, one unanswered question at a time. And I still believed it was because she loved me. I had no idea those missing passwords, redirected mail, hidden statements, and forgotten signatures were leading towards something much bigger. By the time I finally understood what Emily had been building behind my back, people would already be walking through my home, discussing paint colors, measuring my living room walls, and planning a future inside a house I still believed belonged to me. The morning everything fell apart began like every other Tuesday. I watered the flowers Robert had planted years earlier. I fed the birds. I made oatmeal and watched the local news. Nothing felt unusual. At 10 o'clock, Emily called. "Mom, don't forget I'm stopping by this afternoon." "For what?" "I just need to check on a couple of things around the house." "Of course." I thought she was coming to help me replace a leaking kitchen faucet. Instead, she was preparing to sell my home. Around noon, Margaret knocked on my door. "I baked too many cookies." I laughed. "There's no such thing." We sat on the porch talking about ordinary things. The weather, her grandchildren, the church fundraiser. Then she asked a question that caught me off guard. "Have you thought any more about downsizing?" I shook my head. "No." "Good." She smiled. "This house still looks like you." After she left, I walked through every room. Robert's reading chair still sat beside the fireplace. Our wedding picture still hung in the hallway. The marks on the laundry room wall still measured Emily's height from childhood. Every corner held a memory. Selling never crossed my mind. At 1:30, I decided to drive to the grocery store. As I backed out of the driveway, I noticed a white SUV slowing in front of my house. A man inside looked toward my front yard before driving away. I assumed he was lost. I couldn't have been more wrong. I spent less than an hour shopping. When I returned, 2 unfamiliar cars were parked in front of my house. For a moment, I wondered if someone had mistaken my address. Then I noticed the front door standing wide open. My heart skipped. I hurried inside. There were strangers in my living room. One couple was opening closet doors. Another man was looking through the kitchen windows into my backyard. Someone else was asking questions about the roof. I froze. None of them seemed surprised to see me. Instead, they smiled politely. One woman even said, "It's a beautiful home." I didn't answer. I looked around for Emily. She stepped out of my dining room carrying a clipboard. She looked perfectly calm. "Oh, Mom." She smiled brightly. "You're home earlier than I expected." I stared at her. "Emily." My voice barely worked. "What is this?" She walked over as though nothing unusual was happening. "Just a showing." "A what?" "A house showing." I looked around again. People were still walking through my home. One man was measuring the windows, another was asking about the furnace. I turned back toward Emily. "What house?" She blinked. "Yours." For a second, I honestly believed she was joking. I laughed nervously. "Very funny." She didn't laugh. "Emily." I stepped closer. "What is going on?" She lowered her voice. "Mom, let's not make a scene." "A scene?" I looked around at the strangers. "These people are inside my house." She placed a hand gently on my arm. "I listed it yesterday." Every sound around me disappeared. The conversations, the footsteps, the laughter. Everything became silent. "You!" I could barely breathe. "Did what?" "I listed the house online." My heart pounded. "You had no right." She sighed dramatically. "We talked about this." "No, we didn't." "We absolutely did." "I never agreed to sell my home." Several people glanced toward us. Emily forced another smile. "Can we discuss this privately?" "No." My voice became louder than I intended. "I want an explanation." She took a slow breath. "Mom, this house is too much for you." "I decide that. You deserve somewhere safer." "I live safely here." "A retirement community would be better." "I never said I wanted one." Emily folded her arms. "You signed the paperwork." The words hit me like cold water. "What paperwork?" "The authorization." "I signed no authorization." "You don't remember." Her answer came too quickly. "Yes, I do." "No." She looked almost sympathetic. "You've forgotten." For the first time in my life, I questioned my own memory. Had I numbered? I searched every conversation we had ever shared. I remembered signing documents, insurance forms, bank papers, routine paperwork. Never permission to sell my home. I would remember that? Emily gave me a patient smile. You said the same thing about your retirement account. I stared at her. She was using my own uncertainty against me. One of the visitors approached us. Excuse me? He smiled politely. Is this the original hardwood floor? Emily answered before I could speak. Yes, I interrupted. The showing is over. The man looked confused. Emily quickly laughed. My mother gets overwhelmed. I'm not overwhelmed. I looked directly at every visitor. I'm the homeowner. The room became very quiet. I never agreed to sell this house. Several people exchanged uncomfortable looks. Emily immediately stepped between me and them. My mother has been under a lot of stress since my father passed. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She wasn't simply ignoring me. She was making me sound incapable. One couple quietly walked toward the front door. Another whispered something I couldn't hear. Still, a few people remained. Emily continued smiling as though she were hosting a dinner party instead of destroying my life. I felt invisible inside my own home. Then I noticed something sitting on the kitchen counter, a stack of glossy brochures. The front page showed a beautiful photograph of my house. Across the top were the words, "New listing." I picked one up. Every room had been professionally photographed. The living room, the bedrooms, the backyard, even Robert's workshop. Someone had entered every corner of my home without me knowing. There was a price printed at the bottom. I nearly dropped the brochure. This wasn't an idea. It wasn't a discussion. It was already happening. When were these pictures taken? I asked quietly. Emily hesitated. Last week. I was at Margaret's house. You were gone for 2 hours. You brought photographers into my house. I had a key? The sentence stunned me. Of course she had a key. I had given it to her years ago for emergencies. She had used my trust to prepare my house for strangers. I looked around again. Every room suddenly felt unfamiliar. The throw pillows had been rearranged. Family photographs had disappeared from the shelves. Fresh flowers sat on the dining table. Even the blankets on my sofa had been replaced. Emily hadn't just listed my house. She had erased me from it. At that exact moment, another man walked through the front door. He looked to be in his early 50s. Work boots, blue jeans, calm eyes. He smiled politely as he stepped inside. Then he looked at me. His expression changed instantly. The smile disappeared. His eyes widened. He stared at me for several long seconds. Finally, he whispered, Mrs. Bennett. I slowly turned toward him. I'm sorry. He took another step. You're Sylvia Bennett, aren't you? I nodded without speaking. His face filled with disbelief. Then he looked at Emily, then back at me. Finally, he asked the question that would change everything. If this is your house? He paused. Why do you look like you had no idea it was for sale? The room became completely silent. Emily's confident smile disappeared for the very first time. No one answered the man's question. Not Emily, not me, not the real estate agent standing awkwardly beside the front door. The silence lasted only a few seconds, but it felt much longer. Emily recovered first. She forced another smile. My mother has been under a lot of stress lately. The man never looked away from me. Instead, he asked softly, Mrs. Bennett, are you okay? Something about his voice felt familiar, kind, respectful. I searched his face. Brown hair with streaks of gray, strong shoulders, weathered hands. He looked like someone who had spent years working outdoors. "I'm sorry," I admitted. "Have we met before?" He smiled sadly. "You probably don't remember me." I opened my mouth to apologize. Then he continued, "But I could never forget you." Emily stepped forward. "Sir, if you're interested in the property, I'd be happy to continue the tour." He ignored her. He kept looking at me. "My name is Thomas Reed." The name stirred something deep inside my memory. Thomas Reed. Thomas. Then it hit me. A little boy. Dark curly hair. Always wearing the same worn-out backpack. 2nd grade, Jefferson Elementary. "You," I whispered. "You're Caleb's father." Thomas smiled. "Yes." I covered my mouth. Oh my goodness. Suddenly, I wasn't standing in my living room anymore. I was back inside room 12 at Jefferson Elementary nearly 25 years earlier. Caleb Reed had been one of the quietest children I had ever taught. He never caused trouble, never complained, but every Monday he arrived wearing the same clothes he had worn on Friday. His lunchbox was almost always empty. One winter morning, I noticed he wasn't wearing a coat. Outside, snow covered the playground. I knelt beside his desk. "Caleb, where's your jacket?" He looked down. "My dad says I'll be okay." That afternoon, I quietly called his father. Thomas had sounded embarrassed before I even finished introducing myself. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Bennett. I just started a new job. Money's tight." He spoke those last 2 words so quietly I almost didn't hear them. The next day, I visited a local church clothing drive after school. I bought a warm winter coat with my own money. The receipt stayed hidden inside my purse. The following morning, I told Caleb the school had received a donation. His eyes lit up when I handed him the coat. He believed it had come from strangers. I never corrected him. Children should never feel like charity cases. A few weeks later, I noticed something else. Caleb kept pretending he wasn't hungry during lunch. I spoke privately with the cafeteria manager. We arranged free meals without anyone announcing it. Again, Caleb never knew. Later that spring, Thomas lost his apartment. One of the church volunteers mentioned it to me. I quietly connected him with a community housing program. I made a few phone calls, filled out a couple of forms. Nothing extraordinary, just what any decent teacher would have done. At least, that's what I believed. I hadn't thought about the Reed family in years. But Thomas clearly had. Back in my living room, his eyes became emotional. "You helped my son without ever making us feel ashamed." I shook my head. "I only did what was right." "You did much more than that." His voice cracked. "You gave us dignity." Emily interrupted. "I'm sorry, but this really isn't the time." Thomas finally looked at her. "No." His tone remained calm. "I think this is exactly the time." He pointed toward me. "When I walked in here?" He paused. Mrs. Bennett looked shocked. He turned back to me. "You really didn't know your house was being sold?" I answered honestly. "No." His jaw tightened. "I believe her." Emily crossed her arms. "She's confused." Thomas frowned. "Is she? She's been forgetting things?" "I haven't forgotten my own house." I spoke louder than I intended. The room became quiet again. Several potential buyers were pretending not to listen. But they were listening, every one of them. Thomas took another careful step toward me. "Mrs. Bennett," he lowered his voice. "Did you sign the listing agreement yourself?" I looked at Emily, then back at him. "I don't know." Those words hurt to say, not because they were true, because I hated doubting myself. Thomas nodded slowly. "I understand." Emily quickly jumped in. Everything is perfectly legal, Thomas calmly replied. I didn't ask you. For the first time that afternoon, Emily looked uncomfortable. The real estate agent finally spoke. Perhaps we should reschedule today's showing? Emily shook her head. No. Thomas looked directly at the agent. I think that's a good idea. Another couple quietly placed the brochure back on the counter. We're going to leave. The husband added, This doesn't feel right. Within 2 minutes, nearly everyone had walked outside. Only Thomas remained. Emily glared at him. You've just ruined this sale. Thomas answered calmly. If the homeowner doesn't understand why her house is for sale. He paused. There shouldn't have been a sale. Emily's face turned red. You don't know our family. You're right. I don't. But I know her. He pointed toward me. I knew her long before today. He looked back at me with a gentle smile. When my life was falling apart, you treated me like a human being. I owe you more than you'll ever know. Tears filled my eyes. I honestly couldn't remember doing anything extraordinary. Teachers spend decades helping children. Eventually, the faces blur together. The kindness becomes routine. You never expect it to return. Thomas reached into his wallet. He pulled out an old folded photograph. I carry this everywhere? He handed it to me. It showed a young Caleb wearing the winter coat I had given him. Standing beside him was a much younger Thomas. On the back, written in faded ink, were 5 words. Never forget Mrs. Bennett's kindness. I couldn't stop crying. I don't even remember this. Thomas smiled. I do. He took a slow breath. My son graduated college. He's an engineer now. He still talks about his 2nd grade teacher. I laughed through my tears. I can't believe that. He says one teacher changed how he saw himself. Emily sighed impatiently. Are we finished here? Thomas slowly turned toward her. I have one more question. She folded her arms. What if Mrs. Bennett never intended to sell? He looked around the room. Why were these showings scheduled before she even knew about them? Emily didn't answer. Thomas waited. Still nothing. He nodded. I thought so. He walked toward the front door. I suddenly felt desperate. Thomas. He stopped. Yes. I don't know what's happening. I know. I feel like I'm losing my mind. His expression softened. No. He shook his head gently. I don't think you are. He reached into his pocket and handed me a business card. I own Reed Construction now. I buy older homes, renovate them, and sell them. I glanced at the card. I wasn't looking for another project. He smiled sadly. I only came because I liked the pictures online. He hesitated. But after meeting you today, his voice became firm. I'm not buying this house. Emily looked furious. Thomas continued. And if I were you? He looked directly into my eyes. I wouldn't sign another piece of paper until someone independent looks at everything. I swallowed hard. What do you mean? I mean. He glanced briefly toward Emily before lowering his voice. Something about this doesn't add up. Then he quietly added the words that stayed with me all night. People don't usually look terrified when they're selling the home they love. He walked out the front door. I watched him drive away. For the first time since Robert died, someone believed me. Someone believed I wasn't confused. Someone believed my fear was real. And somehow, that frightened me even more. Because if a stranger could see something was wrong after only 5 minutes inside my house, how much had I failed to see during the last 3 years? After Thomas left the house, felt strangely empty. Not because the visitors were gone, because certainty had gone with them. Emily closed the front door harder than necessary. She spun toward me. "I hope you're happy." I stared at her. "Happy? You embarrassed me," I almost laughed. "You invited strangers into my home." "They were buyers. They were strangers." She rubbed her temples. "This is exactly why I didn't want you here during the showing." I couldn't believe what I had heard. My own house. My own showing. "And you didn't want me here." She looked away. "You would have made everything difficult." I stepped closer. "I made it difficult because I didn't know my house was for sale." Emily didn't answer. Instead, she began gathering brochures from the kitchen counter. I watched her stack them neatly inside a folder. Every movement looked rehearsed, as if she'd already imagined this conversation. "Mom," she finally said, "you need to trust me." I answered quietly. "I did." Those 3 words stopped her for a moment. Then she walked toward the dining room. "I'll come back tomorrow." "No." She turned around. "We're not finished." "I am." I stood straighter than I had in years. "I want every key to this house." She blinked. "What?" "The spare key. The garage remote. Everything." She forced a laugh. "You're overreacting." "I don't think I am." She hesitated before pulling the spare key from her purse. She placed it on the table. "I still have the garage opener in my car." "I want that too." She sighed loudly. "You really think I'm stealing your house?" I don't know what to think. For the first time, I saw fear flash across her face. Not guilt. Fear. She left without another word. The moment her car disappeared, I locked every door. Then I sat in Robert's old chair. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. The house was quiet again, but it no longer felt safe. An hour later, my phone rang. Thomas. I stared at the screen before answering. "Hello?" "Mrs. Bennett?" His voice was calm. "I hope I'm not bothering you." "No, I was hoping you'd call." He hesitated. "I've been thinking about today." "So have I. I can't stop wondering whether you're all right." I looked around my living room. "I honestly don't know." There was silence. Then he asked, "Would you mind if I asked you a few questions?" "I suppose." "When was the last time you saw the paperwork for your house?" I frowned. "I don't remember." "Do you know where your deed is?" "I thought it was in my filing cabinet." "You thought?" "I looked. It wasn't there." He paused. "What about your mortgage documents?" "I paid off the mortgage years ago." "Do you have the paperwork?" "I don't know." Every answer sounded weaker than the one before. Thomas wasn't accusing me. He was simply helping me realize how little I actually knew. He spoke carefully. "I'm not saying anything illegal happened. But something feels wrong." "I agree. I think you should have someone review your documents." "I don't even know where they are." "Then that's the first problem?" He continued. "Do you have an attorney?" "No." "What about the lawyer who handled Robert's estate?" I thought for a moment. "He retired." Thomas took a slow breath. "I know someone. Her name is Rebecca Lawson. She specializes in helping seniors. I've worked with her before. I'll give you her number." I wrote it down on the back of an envelope. Before hanging up, he added one more thing. "Mrs. Bennett." "Yes. Please don't sign anything." "Not until someone explains every single page." "I promise." That evening, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw strangers walking through my house. The next morning, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. I searched my own office. Not casually, seriously. I opened every drawer, every cabinet, every storage box. I found old tax returns, Robert's military papers, family photographs, insurance policies from 20 years ago. But I couldn't find the most important documents. No property deed, no bank records, no retirement statements, nothing. It was as though someone had quietly removed every piece of paper proving I owned my own life. Around noon, Margaret stopped by. One look at my face told her everything. What happened? I invited her inside. Then I told her about the showing. The buyers, Thomas, Emily, everything. Margaret listened without interrupting. When I finished, she quietly asked, "Can I tell you something?" "Please." "I've been worried for a long time." "I know. I just didn't know how to make you listen." I lowered my head. "You were right." "No." She shook her head gently. "I wish I had been wrong." I began crying. "I feel so stupid." Margaret immediately sat beside me. "No. I should have asked questions. Yes, I should have read those papers. Probably. I should have listened to you." She took both of my hands. "Sylvia, listen to me. You trusted your daughter. That isn't stupidity. That's motherhood." Her words only made me cry harder. An hour later, my phone rang again. "Emily." I almost ignored it. Instead, I answered. "What?" "I need you to calm down." "I'm perfectly calm." "No, you're not. You scared away the buyers." "I didn't invite them." She sighed. "You've created a huge problem." "For who?" "For both of us." That sentence caught my attention. Both of us. "What do you mean?" "I mean," she hesitated, "we've already invested money into selling the house." "We invested?" I frowned. "What money?" "The staging, the photography, the listing, the inspections. I paid deposits." "I never asked you to." "You don't understand." "No," I answered firmly. "I don't." She became quiet. Then she said something that stayed with me. "It has to sell." "Not, I think it should sell." "Not, it would be good for you." "No, it has to sell." Why, I asked exactly that. "Why does it have to sell?" There was a long silence. Finally, she answered, "It just does." Then she hung up. I stared at my phone. That conversation changed everything. Until then, I believed Emily wanted to sell the house because she thought it was best for me. Now I wasn't so sure. Her words sounded desperate, not caring. Desperate. That evening, Thomas texted me an address. Rebecca Lawson's office. He added one sentence. "She can see you tomorrow morning." I replied with only 2 words. "Thank you." Before going to bed, I walked through every room of my house. I touched the kitchen counter Robert had installed himself. I ran my fingers across the worn banister, where Emily used to slide down as a little girl. I stood inside our bedroom and looked at the empty side of the closet that had once belonged to my husband. This house wasn't just property. It was the only place where every chapter of my life still existed. If someone wanted me to leave, they needed more than my signature. They needed my memories, and I wasn't ready to surrender either one. The next morning, I would meet attorney Rebecca Lawson. I thought I was simply asking someone to explain confusing paperwork. I had no idea she was about to uncover the first piece of evidence that proved my worst fear. This had never been about helping me. It had been a plan, and that plan had started much earlier than I ever imagined. The next morning, I arrived at Rebecca Lawson's office 15 minutes early. I barely slept the night before. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Emily's voice. "You signed the paperwork." Those words haunted me. Had I? Or had I simply trusted too much? Rebecca Lawson greeted me herself. She looked to be in her early 60s, calm and confident. She didn't rush me. She didn't interrupt. She simply said, "Mrs. Bennett, let's start from the beginning." For nearly an hour, I told her everything. Robert's death, Emily taking over my finances, the missing documents, the online listing, Thomas Reed, the house showing. Rebecca listened carefully. When I finished, she folded her hands. "I need to ask you something." "Of course." "Did you ever sign a power of attorney?" The question caught me off guard. "I think so." "When? I'm not sure." "What did Emily tell you it was for?" I searched my memory. Then I remembered. About 2 years earlier, Emily had brought several documents to my kitchen table. She smiled and said, "Mom, if you're ever in the hospital, I need legal permission to help with your finances." At the time, that sounded reasonable. What mother wouldn't want her daughter to help during an emergency? I had thought. Rebecca nodded while taking notes. "That sounds like a durable financial power of attorney." "Is that bad?" "No." She looked directly at me. "The document itself isn't bad. It's common. It's often necessary." I let out a small sigh of relief. Then she continued. "But the authority can be abused." The relief disappeared immediately. Rebecca opened a legal pad. "I'd like to see every document you still have." I placed my small folder on her desk. She quietly examined each paper. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Finally, she looked up. "Where are the rest?" "I don't know." "What do you mean? I can't find them." She frowned slightly. "I'll need to obtain copies." "Can you?" "Yes." She smiled reassuringly. "Most of them." She picked up her phone and began requesting public records. While she worked, I watched the rain outside her office window. Everything felt unreal. I had spent decades teaching children to solve problems by asking questions. Yet somehow, I had stopped asking questions in my own life. About 30 minutes later, Rebecca received several electronic records. She studied the screen. Then she became unusually quiet. "What is it?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned the monitor toward me. "I believe this is the listing authorization." My stomach tightened. There it was. My signature. At least, it looked like my signature. I leaned closer. "That's mine." Rebecca nodded. "I think so." "So I did sign it." "Not necessarily." I looked at her confused. She pointed to another page. "This authorization wasn't signed by you. It was signed by your daughter. Under the authority of your power of attorney." I blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means she wasn't pretending to be you. She was signing on your behalf." "I didn't know she could do that." Rebecca spoke carefully. "Sometimes she legally can. Sometimes she cannot. It depends on the circumstances." I felt hope slipping away. "So, maybe she didn't do anything wrong." Rebecca immediately shook her head. "I didn't say that." She leaned forward. "Mrs. Bennett, a power of attorney requires the person acting on your behalf to do what's in your best interest." She emphasized those last words. "Not theirs." If someone uses that authority primarily to benefit themselves, she paused. That's a very different matter. For the first time, I realized the real question wasn't whether Emily had legal authority. It was whether she had abused it. Rebecca requested additional property records. A few minutes later, another document appeared. She frowned. "What? This is interesting." She printed the page, then handed it to me. It showed a timeline of activity connected to my home. Professional photography authorization, property evaluation, listing preparation. Multiple documents had been filed over several months. Months, not days. My hands began shaking. She planned this? Rebecca didn't answer immediately. She simply pointed to the dates. Every document had been prepared long before I discovered the listing. I whispered, "She never even talked to me." Rebecca remained calm. Planning alone isn't illegal. But hiding everything... She stopped herself. I need more information before drawing conclusions. Just then, someone knocked on her office door. It was Thomas. He looked surprised to see me. "I hope I'm not interrupting." Rebecca smiled. "Actually, your timing is perfect." Thomas sat beside me. "I brought something." He handed Rebecca a folder. "I printed public property records last night." Rebecca opened it. Her eyebrows lifted. "This saves me some time?" Thomas looked embarrassed. "I wasn't trying to interfere." "You aren't." Rebecca smiled. "You're helping." Together they reviewed the documents. Listening to them felt like listening to another language. Recording dates, authorizations, signatures, property disclosures. Finally, Rebecca looked toward me. "Mrs. Bennett, I need to ask something difficult." I nodded. "When Emily had you sign papers, did you actually read them?" The answer came immediately. "No." "Did she explain each document?" "Not really." "Why not?" "Because..." I stopped. The answer sounded foolish now. Because I trusted her." Rebecca didn't judge me. She simply nodded. "I understand." Thomas quietly added, "My father signed papers without reading them too." He trusted family. Rebecca turned back toward me. "I'm going to request a complete copy of the power of attorney. I also want every financial authorization connected to your accounts." "Can you do that?" "Yes." "Will it take long?" "A few days." She paused. "But I'd like you to do something immediately." "What?" "Freeze everything. Everything. Bank accounts, property sale, financial transfers." I looked alarmed. "Can I even do that?" "You can begin." "And I'll help." She handed me a checklist. The list seemed endless. Notify the bank. Change passwords. Cancel pending authorizations. Contact the realtor. Request transaction records. Review credit reports. Each item reminded me how completely I had surrendered control. Rebecca looked at me gently. "I know this feels overwhelming." "It does." "But you're taking your life back." Those words nearly made me cry. As the meeting ended, Thomas walked beside me toward the parking lot. "You all right?" I smiled weakly. "I don't know." He nodded. "I've been there." "What do you mean?" "When Caleb was little." "I spent years believing asking for help made me weak." "It almost destroyed us." He looked at me. "Don't make the same mistake." "You don't have to do this alone." I thanked him. Then I drove home. The house looked exactly the same. Same porch, same flowers, same white shutters. But I wasn't the same woman who had left that morning, because now I knew something I couldn't unknow. Emily hadn't decided to sell my home overnight. She had been preparing for it for months, maybe longer. The betrayal wasn't a single decision. It was a carefully built process. One signature, one password, one missing document at a time. And somewhere inside all those papers, Rebecca believed there was still another piece missing. The one document that would explain why Emily seemed so desperate to sell my house. I had a terrible feeling. Whatever we found next would be far worse than anything we had discovered so far. 3 days later, Rebecca called. Her voice sounded different, not frightened, focused. "Mrs. Bennett, Can you come to my office this afternoon? Did you find something? Yes. Is it bad? She paused. I'd rather explain it in person. My stomach tightened. When someone refuses to discuss something over the phone, your mind imagines the worst. By 2:00, I was sitting across from Rebecca again. This time, Thomas was already there. He stood when I entered. Good afternoon. I smiled weakly. I wish it were. Rebecca closed the office door. I've spent the last several days reviewing your financial records. I took a deep breath. And she slid several folders across the desk. There are problems. What kind of problems? Let's take them one at a time. She opened the first folder. Do you remember how much was in your primary savings account 2 years ago? I shook my head. No. There was just over $280,000. I stared at her. I knew Robert and I had saved carefully. She nodded. You did. Then she flipped to another page. The current balance is a little under $60,000. I blinked. What? You heard me correctly. I felt dizzy. That can't be right. Rebecca slowly turned the bank statements toward me, line after line, withdrawal after withdrawal, transfer after transfer. Some were $5,000. Others were $10,000. A few exceeded $20,000. Every transaction had one thing in common: authorized under power of attorney. I couldn't breathe. Emily. Rebecca nodded. Yes. Tears filled my eyes. She never told me. I know. I looked helplessly at Thomas. He quietly asked, where did the money go? Rebecca opened another folder. That's what we investigated next. She placed several credit reports on the desk. Your daughter has accumulated substantial personal debt. I frowned. Debt, credit cards, personal loans, a home equity line on her own house. She continued turning pages. Several accounts were seriously delinquent. My heart sank. Emily always seemed comfortable. Rebecca gave a sad smile. Many people do. She pointed toward another statement. Your money appears to have been transferred into accounts connected to her. Thomas leaned forward. Was it legal? Rebecca answered carefully. Some transfers may have been allowed. But whether they were appropriate, she paused, is another matter. I rubbed my forehead. I don't understand. If she needed money, why didn't she ask me? Nobody answered, because none of us knew. Rebecca continued. There's more. Those 2 words terrified me. She opened another file. We also found evidence that your credit was used. My credit? She nodded. There are loans opened using your financial information. I never borrowed money. I know. She handed me copies. I stared at signatures that looked vaguely familiar. Some were mine, some were Emily's. Everything blurred together. I don't even know what I'm looking at, Rebecca gently explained. It appears your daughter used your financial strength to qualify for borrowing. Did she forge my signature? We don't know. Some documents were signed under the power of attorney. Others require further examination. Thomas quietly muttered, Oh my God. Rebecca looked at me. Mrs. Bennett. I need to ask another difficult question. I nodded. When Emily brought paperwork to your home, did she separate documents or ask you to sign everything together? I immediately remembered. She had stacked papers neatly. She pointed where I should sign, one after another. I never stopped to ask which document was which. I signed everything. Rebecca slowly closed her eyes. I was afraid you'd say that. Silence filled the room. Finally, I whispered, So she planned all this. Rebecca answered carefully. I believe she was solving a financial crisis. Using your assets. The words felt like knives. Not because they were cruel, because they made sense. Suddenly, Emily's desperate sentence echoed inside my head. It has to sell. Not because of me, because she needed the money. Rebecca opened the final folder. This concerns the house. I almost didn't want to look. The real estate listing estimated your home's sale price. She pointed to the number. Nearly $600,000. If the property sold, Rebecca continued, most of the remaining debt connected to your daughter could potentially be paid. I stared at the figure. The house wasn't simply valuable, it was the solution to Emily's financial disaster. Thomas quietly asked, Does she owe that much? Rebecca nodded. Close. My heart broke. Not because of the money. Because my daughter had reached a point where she believed selling my home without my knowledge was easier than asking me for help. I suddenly remembered dozens of conversations. Emily declining invitations to restaurants. Emily looking exhausted. Emily arguing quietly with David on the phone. Emily checking her banking app every few minutes. I had mistaken stress for overwork. It had been debt. Rebecca interrupted my thoughts. There is one more concern. I almost laughed. There can possibly be more. She slid another document across the desk. This is a recent communication between the realtor and your daughter. She had obtained it legally during her investigation. One sentence was highlighted. Need sale completed before loan deadline. I stared at those words. Loan deadline. Emily wasn't selling my house someday. She was racing against time. Thomas looked furious. So she wasn't downsizing her mother? No, Rebecca answered. She was trying to avoid financial collapse. My chest tightened. For a brief moment, I stopped feeling angry. I felt sorry for Emily. Then I remembered the strangers walking through my bedroom. The missing documents, the lies, the manipulation. The sympathy disappeared. Rebecca finally leaned back. I believe we now understand the motive. What happens next? We protect you. She handed me another folder. I've already begun notifying the appropriate institutions. The real estate transaction should be paused. The bank has flagged additional transfers. And... She hesitated. I believe it's time law enforcement becomes involved. Those words shocked me. The police... Potentially. I don't want Emily arrested. Rebecca looked at me kindly. I understand. But financial exploitation of an older adult is taken very seriously. I never wanted this. I know. Thomas quietly spoke for the first time in several minutes. Neither did she. He looked directly at me. You spent your life helping people. You never imagined you'd need someone to help you. He was right. I had always been the one solving problems. Now I had become the person needing protection. As I prepared to leave, Rebecca stopped me. Mrs. Bennett. Yes. I don't think your daughter expected anyone to question the sale. What changed everything? She smiled toward the empty chair where Thomas had been sitting earlier. Was one buyer recognizing his second-grade teacher? I looked toward Thomas. He smiled modestly. I just happened to remember kindness. I shook my head. No. You remembered the truth. As I drove home, one realization refused to leave my mind. The house had never been Emily's goal. Money was. The house was simply the fastest way to get it. And if she had been willing to hide all of this, how far would she go now that her entire plan was beginning to fall apart? For 2 days after meeting with Rebecca, I did not hear from Emily. No calls, No texts. No cheerful voice asking whether I needed groceries. The silence felt unnatural. Emily had contacted me almost every day for years. Now that I knew where my money had gone, she had vanished. I kept wondering what she was doing. Was she afraid? Was she angry? Or was she trying to move the remaining money before Rebecca could stop her? On the third morning, David Carter appeared at my front door. Emily's husband looked 10 years older than the last time I had seen him. His shirt was wrinkled. His eyes were red. He stood on the porch with both hands buried in his pockets. "Can I come in?" I hesitated. "Is Emily with you?" "No." I stepped aside. David entered slowly and stared at the living room. His gaze moved toward the empty spaces where Emily had removed my family photographs for the showing. "I heard what happened." "Which part?" My voice was colder than I intended. "The house. The money." He lowered his eyes. "All of it." I pointed toward the kitchen. "Sit down." David took a chair at the table where Emily had once placed those documents in front of me. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, I asked, "How much did you know?" He rubbed his hands together. "Not enough." "That isn't an answer." "I knew we had debt." "How much?" "I don't know the exact number." I stared at him. "Your family was nearly $500,000 in debt, and you don't know the number." He looked ashamed. "Emily handled the finances." The irony hit me so hard, I almost laughed. Emily had taken control of my money while keeping her own husband ignorant of theirs. "What did you think was happening?" "I thought she was refinancing things." "With my savings?" His head lifted. "I didn't know about your savings." "What about the loans in my name?" His face changed. Shock. Real shock. "Loans." I watched him carefully. Rebecca had warned me not to reveal too much, but I needed to know whether David was part of it. "Emily used my financial information." He stood abruptly. "No." "Sit down." "She wouldn't do that." I almost smiled at the familiar sentence. I had said the same thing many times. "Yes," I replied. "She would." David slowly sat again. His shoulders collapsed. For the next hour, he told me about the life Emily had hidden. It began with small things. New furniture, designer handbags, expensive dinners, weekend trips they couldn't afford. Whenever David questioned the spending, Emily told him she had received a bonus at work. Then she began investing. At first, the investments seemed successful. She showed him numbers on her phone. Profits, growth, promises. "I thought she knew what she was doing," he said. "What was she investing in? Rental properties, online businesses, some technology fund?" His voice became quieter. "I never understood it." "Then why did you let her continue?" He stared at the table. "Because she made me feel stupid whenever I asked." That sentence was painfully familiar. Emily hadn't only controlled me. She controlled every conversation by making questions sound like accusations. David continued. One investment collapsed. Then another. Instead of admitting the losses, Emily borrowed money to hide them. Credit cards covered loan payments. New loans covered old credit cards. She refinanced their house. Then she opened additional accounts. Every month, she promised David everything was temporary. She kept saying one good deal would fix it all. He explained. Did you believe her? I wanted to. Wanting to believe someone can be more dangerous than trusting them. I knew that now. David said the pressure grew worse after he lost overtime hours at work. Emily refused to reduce their lifestyle. She continued buying expensive clothes. She replaced their car. She hosted holiday dinners that looked perfect in photographs. "No one knew," he said. "That was the point." I thought about Emily's social media pictures. Beautiful kitchen, perfect table, smiling couple. Every image had been built on borrowed money. Why didn't she ask me for help? David looked at me with tired eyes. She did. My heart stopped. What? Not directly? He swallowed. She said you had more money than you needed. The sentence cut deeper than any number Rebecca had shown me. What exactly did she say? That the house was paid off? That your retirement was secure? That eventually everything would belong to her anyway? I turned toward the window. I couldn't let him see my face. Eventually. That word turned my life into a waiting period before her inheritance. David continued quietly. I told her your money wasn't ours. What did she say? She said family money should solve family problems. I closed my eyes. Emily had not seen herself as stealing. She had rewritten the meaning of ownership until taking from me felt justified. When did she decide to sell the house? David hesitated. About 6 months ago. 6 months. Long before the photographs, long before the listing, long before strangers entered my home. She mentioned a senior community, he said. She told me you wanted to move. I never said that. I know that now. Did you believe her then? He nodded. She showed me brochures. I remembered Emily leaving glossy retirement community pamphlets on my coffee table. I had assumed they were advertisements. They were part of her plan. She said you'd be happier somewhere smaller, David continued. She said selling the house would help everyone. Everyone except me. He had no answer. I looked at him carefully. Why are you telling me this now? David's jaw tightened. Because she still won't stop. A chill moved through me. What do you mean? She says Rebecca Lawson is manipulating you. She says Thomas Reed wants the house cheaply. She says Margaret turned you against her. I almost laughed. Emily had built a villain for every truth she couldn't deny. And what does she say about the money? She says she was borrowing it. Without asking. She planned to repay you after the sale. The logic was impossible. She would repay the money she stole by selling the house she was stealing. Yet somewhere in Emily's mind, it made sense. David reached into his jacket and placed a small envelope on the table. I found this in our home office. Inside were overdue notices, credit card statements, demand letters. One document had a deadline printed in bold red letters. The deadline was less than 2 weeks away. If she doesn't pay, David said, the bank may move against our house. I stared at him. So she wanted to sacrifice mine to save hers. He lowered his head. Yes. For a moment, I saw Emily as a little girl again, 8 years old, sitting at this same table, crying because she had broken a neighbor's window. Robert had told her, mistakes become lies when you're too afraid to admit them. Emily had admitted that mistake. But somewhere along the way, she had learned to hide bigger ones. I asked David one final question. Is she sorry? He thought for a long time. No, his answer was honest. Right now, she's scared. That's not the same thing. After he left, I called Rebecca. I told her everything. She listened quietly. Then she said, keep those documents safe. David may become an important witness. I looked at the overdue notices spread across my kitchen table. For the first time, I understood the full shape of Emily's secret life. It wasn't one reckless purchase. It wasn't one bad investment. It was years of pretending, years of borrowing, years of believing she could outrun the truth. And now, the truth had finally caught her. But desperate people don't always surrender when they're exposed. Sometimes they become more dangerous. That evening, just after dark, someone began pounding on my front door. I didn't need to look through the window. I already knew who it was. "Mom." Emily's voice shook the glass. "Open this door." I stood in the hallway, holding my phone. Then she shouted the words that erased the last doubt in my heart. "You had no right to freeze those accounts." "Not my accounts. Those accounts." As if my money had belonged to her all along. Emily kept pounding on the door. "Mom, open it." I stood in the hallway with my phone in one hand. For the first time in my life, I was afraid of my own daughter. Not because I thought she would hurt me physically, because I no longer knew what she was capable of saying, taking, or twisting. "Emily," I called through the door. "You need to leave." Her pounding stopped. A second later, her voice became softer. "Mom, please." That word almost broke me. Please. The same word she used as a child when she wanted another bedtime story. The same voice she used after Robert died, when she promised I would never be alone. I closed my eyes. Then I remembered the missing money, the loans, the house listing. I unlocked the door, but kept the security chain fastened. Emily stood on the porch. Her hair was messy. Her face was pale. She looked exhausted, but her eyes were burning with anger. "Take off the chain." "No!" Her expression hardened. "You think I'm dangerous now? I think you're desperate." She flinched. Then she looked toward the street. "Are you going to let the neighbors watch this? You created this." "I was trying to fix things. By selling my home." Her voice dropped. "Let me inside." I should have refused, but she was still my daughter. That truth made every decision harder. I removed the chain. Emily pushed past me and walked straight into the living room. She looked around as if checking whether anything had changed. Then she turned. "You froze the accounts. Rebecca helped me protect them." "Rebecca?" Emily laughed bitterly. "Of course. She filled your head with lies." "I saw the bank statements." Her smile vanished. "I saw the transfers." "Mom, I saw the loans in my name." She stopped breathing for a moment. Then she looked away. "I can explain?" "Good." I pointed toward the sofa. "Sit down and explain everything?" She remained standing. "This isn't as simple as Rebecca makes it sound." "Then make it simple." "I borrowed money." "You took money." "I intended to return it." "When, after the house sold." I stared at her. "You planned to repay the money you took by selling the house you took." Her jaw tightened. "You make it sound ugly." "It is ugly." She began pacing. "You don't understand the pressure I've been under." "Then tell me." David's income dropped. The investments failed. The banks kept calling. Everything happened at once. "No." I shook my head. "According to the records, this happened over years." Emily stopped pacing. "You've been talking to David." "He came here." Her face changed instantly. "That coward." "Don't blame him. He let me handle everything, and now he's pretending he knew nothing." "Did he know about my savings?" She looked away. "Did he know about the loans?" Silence. "Did he know you planned to sell my house?" "He knew you were considering moving." "I never considered it." "You complained about the stairs." "Once." "You said the yard was difficult." That didn't mean I wanted to leave. Emily threw up her hands. You were going to need something smaller eventually. Eventually is not permission. Her eyes filled with tears. I was trying to protect all of us. From what? From losing everything? Her scream filled the room. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I asked quietly, "Whose everything?" She stared at me. Your house? Your car? Your reputation? What exactly were you protecting? Her tears began falling. My life. At least that answer was honest. I sat in Robert's chair. Emily remained across from me. Between us was the space where trust used to be. Why didn't you ask me for help? She laughed through her tears. Because you would have judged me. You don't know that. I do. You and Dad spent your whole lives saving. You never bought anything you couldn't afford. You always had an answer for everything. Do you know what it was like growing up with perfect parents? I stared at her. Perfect? Yes. Everyone loved Sylvia and Robert Bennett. The wonderful teacher, the dependable husband, the responsible couple. Her voice grew sharper. I could never make a mistake without feeling like a disappointment. I felt as though she had opened a door to a room I never knew existed. Emily, we loved you. You expected me to be like you. We expected you to be honest. That's easy when you're never failing. Her words hurt, but I refused to let pain erase facts. Your resentment does not excuse stealing from me. I didn't steal. You changed my passwords. Because you forgot them. You redirected my mail. Because you ignored it. You used my credit. Because mine was ruined. You listed my home without telling me. Her face twisted. Because you would have said no. The room went still. There it was. The truth. Not confusion. Not misunderstanding. She knew exactly what my answer would have been. I stood slowly. When did I stop being your mother and become your bank account? Emily opened her mouth. Nothing came out. I continued. When did my home become your emergency fund? When did Robert's savings become your reward for being our daughter? That's not fair. No. My voice shook. What's unfair is making me question my own memory. You told strangers I was confused. You used my age to silence me. I was trying to keep the showing calm. You were trying to make everyone doubt me. Emily covered her face. I was scared. So was I. I pointed toward the hallway. I came home and found strangers measuring my windows. I stood in my own living room while my daughter explained that I no longer understood my own decisions. Do you know what that did to me? She began sobbing. For one weak moment, I wanted to hold her. My body remembered being her mother before my mind remembered the betrayal. But I stayed where I was. Say it, I told her. She looked up. Say what you did. I borrowed money. No, I made bad decisions. No? Her voice became angry again. What do you want from me? The truth. She wiped her face. I used the power of attorney. For what? To move money. And to apply for loans. And, she closed her eyes. To list the house. Without my consent. She whispered, yes. The word nearly brought me to my knees. I had known it already, but hearing her admit it made the betrayal real in a different way. Why were the accounts frozen? She demanded suddenly. Because the money is mine. If those payments don't clear, David and I could lose our house? I looked directly at her. And your solution was for me to lose mine. She shook her head quickly. You would have moved somewhere beautiful, a luxury senior community. You would have had activities, meals, people around you. I almost couldn't believe she was still defending it. You chose my future without asking me. I chose the option that saved everyone. No. I stepped closer. You chose the option that saved you. Emily's face hardened. Then she said the cruelest thing she had ever said to me. The house will be mine one day anyway. The words hung between us. She regretted them immediately. I saw it in her eyes, but some sentences cannot be taken back. I opened the front door. Leave. Mom? Leave. I didn't mean it like that. How else could you mean it? She reached for my hand. I pulled away. Don't. Her face collapsed. I love you. I believed she did. That was the most painful part. She loved me, but she had also used me. Love without respect had nearly cost me everything. You need to go, I said. What happens now? Rebecca will handle the legal matters. Panic crossed her face. You're choosing strangers over your own daughter. No. I met her eyes. I'm choosing the truth over another lie. Emily stepped onto the porch. Before leaving, she turned back. Will you ever forgive me? I couldn't answer. Not because forgiveness was impossible. Because the woman standing before me still wanted forgiveness before accepting responsibility. I closed the door. Then I leaned against it and cried until my legs gave way. That night, something inside our family finally broke. But by morning, Rebecca would call with urgent news. Emily had tried to contact the realtor again. The house was still listed, and unless we acted immediately, the next battle would no longer happen inside my living room. It would happen in court. Rebecca called at 7 the next morning. I had been awake for hours. Sleep had become impossible. Every sound made me think someone was opening the front door. Every passing car made me wonder whether another buyer had arrived. Sylvia? Rebecca said, Emily contacted the realtor after leaving your house. My stomach tightened. What did she say? She insisted the sale was still authorized under the power of attorney. But I revoked it. We started the process. The formal notice has not reached every party yet. I gripped the phone. Can she still sell my house? Not if we act quickly. Those words did not comfort me. They frightened me. Rebecca told me to meet her at the county courthouse at 9. When I arrived, Thomas was waiting outside. He wore a dark jacket instead of his usual work clothes. Margaret stood beside him, holding a folder against her chest. I stared at them. What are you both doing here? Thomas answered first. Rebecca called me. Margaret touched my arm. And I wasn't letting you face this alone. For years, I had believed asking for help was a burden. That morning, their presence felt like a shield. Inside the courthouse, Rebecca explained the plan. We're filing for an emergency temporary restraining order. I looked at her blankly. In ordinary language, she gave me a small smile. We're asking a judge to stop anyone from selling, transferring, or borrowing against your house until the facts are reviewed. Will the judge agree? We have strong evidence. Strong enough? Rebecca's expression became serious. That depends on what happens in the next few hours. The realtor had provided copies of messages from Emily. In one, Emily claimed I had become confused after approving the sale. In another, she insisted Thomas had manipulated me because he wanted a lower purchase price. She even accused Margaret of pressuring me to remain in a house I could no longer manage. Every person who helped me had been turned into a villain. Rebecca handed me the printed messages. I read them twice. Emily had described me as forgetful, emotionally unstable, and unable to understand my finances. My daughter had built a version of me that could be ignored. "Can she do this?" I whispered. "She can say it," Rebecca replied. "Now we show the court it isn't true." The hearing took place in a small courtroom. There was no jury, no dramatic crowd, just a judge, a clerk, 2 attorneys, and the people whose lives had been pulled into my daughter's lies. Emily arrived with a lawyer I had never seen before. She avoided looking at me. David came in several minutes later and sat on the opposite side of the room from her. That told me their marriage had already begun to collapse. The judge reviewed Rebecca's filing. Then she looked directly at me. "Mrs. Bennett, do you wish to sell your residence?" "No, Your Honor." "Did you authorize your daughter to list it?" "Not knowingly." Emily's attorney stood. "Your Honor, Mrs. Carter held a valid, durable power of attorney." Rebecca responded immediately. "Authority does not equal permission to exploit." The judge raised one hand. "One at a time." My heart pounded so hard I could hear it. Rebecca presented the timeline, the changed passwords, the redirected mail, the financial transfers, the loans, the listing. Then she called Thomas. He stood and described the showing. He explained how Emily welcomed buyers while I appeared shocked. "What made you suspicious?" Rebecca asked. Thomas looked toward me. "Mrs. Bennett didn't look like someone selling her home." "What did she look like?" "Like someone who had just discovered it was being taken from her." Emily shifted in her seat. Her lawyer asked Thomas whether he had intended to buy the property. "Yes." "And after meeting Mrs. Bennett, you withdrew your interest?" "Correct." "Did you hope the property might later be available at a lower price?" Thomas stared at him. "No. Isn't it true that you developed a personal loyalty toward Mrs. Bennett?" "Yes." The lawyer seemed pleased. "Then your testimony is biased." Thomas remained calm. "She helped my family 25 years ago." "That makes me grateful." "It doesn't make me blind." The courtroom went silent. Then Margaret testified. She described years of conversations. She explained how I had repeatedly said I wanted to remain in my home. She remembered the afternoon we discussed downsizing. "Sylvia was clear," Margaret said. "She had no intention of moving." Emily's lawyer tried to dismiss her as an interfering friend. Margaret looked directly at him. "I am interfering now." She paused. "I wish I had interfered sooner." Next came David. Emily finally looked at him. Her expression was a mixture of betrayal and panic. David described their debts, the failed investments, the hidden loans, the pressure to sell my house before the bank deadline. Emily shook her head throughout his testimony. When Rebecca asked whether I had ever agreed to sacrifice my home to save theirs, David answered, "Not that I ever heard." Then Rebecca presented the bank records. The judge studied them for several minutes. Her face revealed nothing. Finally, she turned toward Emily's attorney. "How were these transfers used for Mrs. Bennett's benefit?" He hesitated. "Some funds may have supported family obligations." "Whose obligations?" Another hesitation. "The defendant's household." The judge leaned back. "That is not what I asked." For the first time that morning, hope entered the room. After a short recess, the judge returned. She granted the temporary order. The sale was frozen. The power of attorney could no longer be used while the investigation continued. No new loans could be placed against my property. No transfer could proceed without court approval. I had won the first battle, but Rebecca squeezed my hand before I could celebrate. "This protects the house for now." "For now?" "The larger case is still beginning." Outside the courtroom, Emily approached me. Her attorney tried to stop her, but she kept walking. You destroyed me, she whispered. I stared at her. No. You brought David here. I didn't force him to tell the truth. Our house could be taken. And mine nearly was, her eyes filled with tears. You're my mother. Yes, my voice trembled. And you used that love as permission. She looked at Thomas, Margaret, and Rebecca standing behind me. You've replaced me with strangers. Thomas stepped forward, but I raised my hand. This was my answer to give. They stood beside me when my own daughter tried to make me doubt myself. Emily's face collapsed. Then, Detective Michael Harris approached us. He was a broad-shouldered man in his late 40s, wearing a plain gray suit. Mrs. Carter. Emily turned. I'm Detective Harris. He held up his identification. I need to speak with you regarding several financial transactions involving Sylvia Bennett. All color disappeared from Emily's face. Her lawyer immediately moved between them. My client will not answer questions without counsel. Detective Harris nodded. That's her right. Then he looked toward me. Mrs. Bennett, I'll also need a formal statement. I felt my brief relief disappear. The court had protected my house, but the evidence had opened another door. A criminal investigation. Outside, Margaret hugged me. Thomas said, You did well in there. I looked back at the courthouse doors. I don't feel like I won. Rebecca stood beside me. Justice rarely feels good when the person who hurt you is someone you love. That sentence stayed with me, because I had saved my home. But I had also watched my daughter stand on the edge of losing hers. The worst part was knowing I had not pushed her there. Her own choices had. As we walked toward the parking lot, Detective Harris called Rebecca back. He had found another transaction. A transfer attempted the night before the hearing. Emily had tried to move the last accessible portion of my retirement money after leaving my house. Even after confessing, even after seeing me cry, even after asking whether I could forgive her. She had tried one more time, and now there was no explanation left that could make it look like a misunderstanding. The attempted transfer changed everything. Until that moment, part of me still wanted to believe Emily had simply panicked, that she had made terrible choices, then lost control of them. But trying to move my retirement money the night before court proved something harder. Even after I confronted her, she was still protecting the lie. Detective Harris asked me to give a formal statement the following afternoon. Rebecca sat beside me while I described every missing document, every changed password, and every signature I had placed on papers I never understood. When we finished, Detective Harris closed his notebook. Mrs. Bennett, your daughter has agreed to speak with us through her attorney. I looked at Rebecca. What does that mean? It may mean she's ready to cooperate, Rebecca said. Or it may mean she knows the evidence is overwhelming. Neither possibility gave me peace. 2 days later, Emily requested a meeting. Her attorney contacted Rebecca and suggested a private conference at Rebecca's office. I almost refused. I was tired of explanations that became excuses. But Rebecca said, "This may be your first chance to hear the complete truth." So I agreed. Emily arrived without makeup. Her hair was tied back loosely. She wore a plain gray sweater I remembered buying for her birthday years earlier. She looked smaller than usual, not younger, just stripped of the confidence she had used to control every room. Her attorney sat beside her. Rebecca sat beside me. For a long time, no one spoke. Then Emily looked directly at me. I need to tell you everything. I folded my hands in my lap. Then tell me. She swallowed hard. It started 3 years ago. Her first major investment had been a small rental property with 2 friends. They promised quick returns. The repairs cost more than expected. One partner disappeared. The tenants stopped paying. Emily borrowed money to keep the project alive. When it failed, she said, I couldn't admit it. To whom? Anyone. She stared at the table. Especially you. I wanted to interrupt. Instead, I waited. After the rental property collapsed, she invested in an online retail company. She believed one successful deal would recover the first loss. That business failed too. By then, the credit cards were nearly full. David knew they were struggling, but he didn't know how badly. Emily began transferring balances between cards. Then she opened personal loans. She used one loan to pay another. Each month became a desperate performance. She dressed well for work, hosted family dinners, posted vacation photographs from trips charged entirely to credit cards. I thought if I looked successful, she whispered, I would become successful again. I shook my head. Looking safe doesn't make you safe. I know. Her voice broke. I know that now. The first time she used my money, she told herself it was temporary. $5,000. She planned to replace it after receiving a work bonus. The bonus was smaller than expected, so she took more. 10,000, then 15. Each transfer made the next one easier. Why didn't you ask me? I demanded. Emily's eyes filled with tears. Because you would have asked questions. Questions you didn't want to answer. She nodded. I was ashamed. I leaned forward. You were not too ashamed to take my savings? Her attorney shifted uncomfortably. Emily closed her eyes. No. Shame didn't stop me. It only made me hide better. That answer was more honest than anything she had said before. She explained how she gained access to my accounts. At first, she truly had intended to help. After Robert died, she worried I would miss bills. She believed organizing my finances was an act of love. Then she saw the balances. My retirement savings, the paid-off house, the emergency fund Robert had built over decades. In my mind, she said, you were secure. So I became less secure for you. No. She wiped her eyes. I told myself you would never notice. The sentence hurt more than I expected. Not because she thought I was wealthy, because she thought I was unaware. Easy to manage, easy to deceive. When did you decide to sell the house? Emily looked toward Rebecca, then back at me. 6 months ago. Why, a lender gave me a final deadline. If I couldn't pay, they would begin legal action. David and I could lose everything. I stared at her. So you chose my home. I told myself you didn't need all that space. You told yourself many things. She nodded. I found the senior community brochures. I calculated what the house might sell for. I thought I could pay the debts, replace some of your savings, and move you somewhere comfortable. Without asking me. If I asked, you would have refused. Exactly. My voice sharpened. You knew my answer. Emily began crying harder. I thought once it was done, you would adjust. Those words revealed the full cruelty of her plan. She had expected my pain to become manageable after the money was gone. You thought I would forgive you? Because I had no other choice. She covered her mouth. I don't know what I thought. Yes, you do. I held her gaze. You thought being my daughter meant I would eventually accept anything. She lowered her head. For several seconds, the only sound was her breathing. Then she confessed something Rebecca had not yet uncovered. The night before the hearing, Emily had tried to transfer the remaining money because she believed the court would freeze everything. She planned to send it directly to the lender. Even after you came to my house? I asked. Yes. Even after you admitted using the power of attorney? Yes. Even after asking whether I could forgive you? Her face collapsed. Yes. I felt tears burning behind my eyes. Why? Because I was still trying to save myself. There it was. No excuse. No mention of family. No claim that she was protecting me. Only the truth. She was trying to save herself. Emily reached across the table, but stopped before touching me. I am sorry. I had heard those words many times in my life, from students, from friends, from Robert after small arguments. But apology is only meaningful when it carries the full weight of what happened. What are you sorry for? I asked. She looked confused. For everything. Say it. Her lips trembled. I'm sorry I used your trust. Keep going. I'm sorry I took your money. And I'm sorry I used your credit. And her voice became barely audible. I'm sorry I tried to sell your house without your permission. I waited. She finally added, I'm sorry I made you doubt your own mind. That was the sentence that broke me. Money could be counted. Documents could be replaced. A house could be legally protected. But she had attacked the one thing aging people already fear losing. Confidence in ourselves. I began to cry. Not loudly. Just quietly enough that Emily understood exactly where the deepest wound was. She cried too. For a moment, we were not opponents in a legal case. We were a mother and daughter staring at what dishonesty had destroyed. I don't know whether I can forgive you, I said. Emily nodded slowly. I understand. No, I wiped my face. You don't get to say you understand yet. You haven't lived with the fear. You haven't stood in your own house while people treated you like a confused old woman. You haven't wondered whether your memories can still be trusted. She lowered her head again. You're right. Rebecca finally spoke. Emily, cooperation does not erase consequences. I know. Restitution will be required. I know. The investigation will continue. Emily looked at me. I know. For the first time, she wasn't asking me to rescue her. She wasn't blaming David, the economy, her childhood, or me. She was simply accepting that the truth had a price. Before leaving, Emily stood beside the door. Mom! I looked at her. I did love you. My chest tightened. I know. That was what made everything so painful. Love had existed, but love without honesty had become dangerous. Emily whispered, I don't expect you to trust me again. I answered carefully. Good. Because trust is not something you ask for after breaking it. It is something you rebuild. She nodded and left. After the door closed, Rebecca asked whether I was all right. No, I said, but for the first time, I know exactly what happened. The mystery was over. Emily had not acted from pure hatred. She had acted from fear, pride, desperation, and years of dishonesty. That made her human. It did not make her innocent. And as the legal consequences moved closer, both of us would have to learn the same painful lesson. Desperation may explain a betrayal. It never erases responsibility. Justice did not arrive with a slammed gavel or a dramatic confession. It came slowly, through bank meetings, court documents, recorded statements, and envelopes I was afraid to open. 3 weeks after Emily's confession, Rebecca called me into her office. Detective Harris was already there. A thick file rested on the table between them. Rebecca motioned toward the chair. Sit down, Sylvia. I knew the news would not be simple. Has something happened? Detective Harris answered. The financial investigation is complete enough for the prosecutor to move forward. My chest tightened. Against Emily? Yes. I looked toward the window. I had known this moment was coming. Still, hearing it felt different. What will happen to her? That will depend on the court. He spoke carefully. Her cooperation matters. So does her willingness to return what she can. Rebecca added. Emily's attorney is negotiating an agreement. I stared at them. Will she go to prison? Neither answered immediately. Finally, Rebecca said, It is possible. The room felt smaller. For weeks I had wanted consequences. Now that they were real, I felt no satisfaction, only grief. Detective Harris seemed to understand. Mrs. Bennett reporting what happened did not create these consequences. Your daughter's actions did. I nodded. But mothers don't stop feeling responsible simply because someone explains the law. Emily eventually accepted responsibility for abusing the power of attorney, making unauthorized transfers using my financial information and attempting to sell my property without my informed consent. The agreement required restitution, financial supervision, community service, mandatory counseling, and a suspended prison sentence that could become active if she violated the court's conditions. She also lost all legal authority over my affairs. Permanently. When Rebecca explained the final terms, she asked, How do you feel? I gave the only honest answer. Relieved and heartbroken. The house sale was formally canceled. The online listing disappeared. The photographs vanished from the real estate website. The sign was removed from my yard. I watched Thomas pull it from the ground himself. He carried it toward his truck, then looked back at me. Want to keep it? Why would I? He smiled. Some people keep reminders of battles they survived. I shook my head. I don't need that sign to remember. Thomas tossed it into the truck bed. Good answer. The property records were corrected. Rebecca helped me revoke the old power of attorney and prepare new legal protections. This time, I read every page. Slowly. When I didn't understand something, I asked. When I still didn't understand, I asked again. No one rushed me. No one sighed. No one made me feel foolish. Rebecca pointed to the signature line. Ready? I held the pen, but did not sign. Explain that section once more. She smiled. Of course. That simple moment meant more than she knew. I was learning that asking questions was not weakness. It was ownership. The bank restored part of the money that had been transferred through disputed transactions. Not all of it could be recovered. Some had already been used to pay lenders. Some had vanished into failed investments. Rebecca warned me from the beginning that financial justice rarely returns every dollar. At first, that made me angry. Robert and I had spent decades saving. Emily had spent years undoing it, but I still had my home, my retirement income, enough savings to live safely, and something I had nearly lost completely: control. I closed the old bank accounts. I opened new ones at a different institution. The manager, a patient woman named Linda Parker, sat with me for almost 2 hours. She helped me create new passwords. She printed monthly statements. She arranged alerts for every transfer. Then she asked, Would you like someone else to receive account access? I answered immediately. No. The word came out sharper than intended. Linda nodded kindly. That's perfectly fine. I softened my voice. For now, I need to do this myself. I understand. And I did. Every Monday morning, I sat at the kitchen table with coffee, a calculator, and my statements. At first, the numbers frightened me. I worried I would make mistakes. I worried technology would confuse me. But slowly, the fear faded. I paid my own utility bill. I reviewed my retirement deposit. I checked the property taxes. Ordinary tasks became victories. Margaret celebrated everyone. The first time I successfully paid a bill online, I called her. I did it. You did what? Paid the electric bill. She laughed. Should I bring champagne? Bring cookies. She arrived 20 minutes later, with both. Thomas remained part of my life, too. He repaired the loose porch railing without charging me. When I protested, he said, "Consider it interest on a 25-year-old winter coat." I laughed for the first time in weeks. One Saturday, he brought Caleb to visit. The quiet little boy I remembered was now a confident man in his 30s. When he saw me, his eyes filled with tears. "Mrs. Bennett," I hugged him. "You became an engineer because you made me believe poor kids could become anything." I shook my head. "You did the work." He smiled. "But you gave me the first reason to try." We sat on the porch for hours. Caleb told me about his wife, his career, and his 2 young daughters. Before leaving, he handed me a photograph. It showed his daughters wearing bright winter coats. On the back, he had written, "Kindness keeps traveling." I placed that photograph beside Robert's picture. For years, I believed the things we do for others disappear once the moment passes. I was wrong. Kindness waits. Sometimes for decades. Then it returns exactly when we need it. My neighbors also rallied around me. People brought meals. Church friends helped organize paperwork. One retired accountant volunteered to review my monthly statements. I thanked him, but said, "Teach me how to review them myself." He smiled. "That's even better." Not everyone was kind. A few people whispered. Some wondered how a retired teacher could be fooled by her own daughter. Others asked why I hadn't noticed the missing money sooner. Their questions hurt. Then Margaret reminded me, people like easy explanations because they make them feel safe. What do you mean? If they can call you careless, they can believe this would never happen to them. She was right. The truth was more uncomfortable. Anyone can be deceived when trust replaces attention. Emily and David lost their house. The bank completed the foreclosure after they failed to meet the final deadline. David moved into a small apartment near his job. He filed for legal separation. He never blamed me. One afternoon, he called. "I should have stopped things sooner." "So should I," he sighed. We both believed what was easiest to believe. Emily moved into a modest apartment after the court proceedings. She sold the expensive car. The designer clothes disappeared. The photographs of perfect vacations vanished from her social media. For the first time, her life looked like the truth. She began therapy. She took a second job. A portion of every paycheck went toward restitution. She wrote me letters. At first, I left them unopened. Then, one evening, I read the first. She did not ask for forgiveness. She did not blame David. She simply described the damage she had caused. At the end, she wrote, "I am learning that being sorry means living differently, not speaking differently." I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. I wasn't ready to answer. But I didn't throw it away. Months earlier, that would have felt impossible. Now it felt like the smallest opening. Not trust, not forgiveness. Just the possibility that consequences were finally teaching Emily what love never could. One Sunday morning, I stood alone in my living room. The family photographs were back on the shelves. Robert's chair was beside the fireplace. Sunlight covered the floor strangers had once measured for their furniture. The house belonged to me again. Legally, financially, emotionally. Yet one question remained. Could I ever allow Emily through the front door without hearing her say the house would be hers one day? I had recovered my independence. But forgiveness was a different kind of work, and soon I would have to decide whether protecting my heart meant closing it forever, or opening it carefully with boundaries strong enough to keep me safe. 6 months passed before I invited Emily back into my home. During that time, she never appeared without permission. She did not ask me for money. She did not demand an answer to her letters. Every other Friday, a small restitution payment arrived in my account. The amounts were modest. Sometimes only $100, but each payment carried a message Emily had finally begun to understand. What she took had belonged to me. She could not repair the damage with promises. She had to repay it through action. Her letters continued. In one, she told me she had begun therapy. In another, she admitted she still felt the urge to hide whenever something went wrong. Her therapist had asked her a simple question. What are you protecting when you lie? Emily wrote that her first answer had been, my family. Then she realized the truth. She had been protecting the version of herself she wanted everyone else to see. The successful daughter, the capable wife, the woman who never needed help. That false image had cost her almost everything real. I read every letter. I answered none of them. Margaret never pressured me. Neither did Thomas. But one afternoon, while we sat on my porch, Margaret asked, "Are you waiting for Emily to become the daughter she was before?" I looked at her. "I don't know. She can't." The words hurt. Margaret continued gently. "And you can't become the mother you were before either." I stared at the flowers Robert had planted. "So what does that leave us?" Two different women deciding whether they can build something new. That night, I opened the drawer where I kept Emily's letters. I reread the first one, then the second, then all of them. The early letters were filled with shame. The later ones were different. They contained details. She had sold her jewelry. She had completed 70 hours of community service at a senior support center. She had taken a second job doing bookkeeping for a small dental office. She was attending weekly therapy. She had created a written budget and allowed a court-appointed supervisor to review it. She did not say, "Look how much I've changed." She simply reported what she had done. For the first time, her words were not trying to control my reaction. A week later, I called her. She answered after the first ring. "Mom?" Her voice trembled. "Hello, Emily." Neither of us knew what to say next. Finally, I asked, "Are you free Sunday afternoon?" "Yes." "I thought we could meet." "At Rebecca's office?" "No." I took a slow breath. "Here." The silence lasted several seconds. "Are you sure?" "No," I answered honestly. "But I'm willing." Emily arrived exactly at 2:00. No early entrance, no spare key, no walking in as though the house belonged to her. She knocked. When I opened the door, she stood on the porch holding nothing. No flowers, no groceries, no gift designed to soften me. Just herself. "May I come in?" The question mattered. I stepped aside. "Yes." She entered slowly. Her eyes moved across the living room. The photographs were back on the shelves. Robert's chair sat beside the fireplace. The house looked like mine again. Emily noticed the small, framed photograph of Caleb's daughters. She smiled faintly. "Thomas brought that." "Caleb did." She nodded. "I'm glad they found you." The words could have sounded bitter. They didn't. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I had signed away so much without reading. For a moment, I wondered whether choosing that place had been a mistake. Then I realized I needed a new memory there. Emily folded her hands. "How have you been?" "Better. I'm glad." Another silence followed. It was painful, but I refused to fill it with easy conversation. Finally, Emily said, "I've been practicing how to sit with discomfort." I almost smiled. "How is that going?" "Uncomfortably." A small laugh escaped me. Then hers followed. It lasted only a second, but it was the first moment between us that did not feel like testimony. She told me about therapy. She was learning to identify the moment fear became dishonesty. She had spent years believing that admitting failure would make people stop loving her. So, I lied to keep love, she said. But every lie made me less capable of loving anyone properly. I studied her face. That sounds like something your therapist said? Emily nodded. The first part was. And the second, I learned that myself. I appreciated the honesty. She told me David had decided to continue with the separation. They spoke occasionally, mostly through attorneys. She did not blame him. He gave me chances to tell the truth, she said. I made him feel foolish for asking. I remembered how she had done the same to me. Do you understand now why I can't give you access to my life again? Yes. My bank accounts will remain private. I understand. You will never hold my power of attorney again. I know. You will not receive a key to this house. Her face tightened, but she nodded. I understand. I leaned forward. And if I say no, you will accept it without explaining why you know better. A tear slid down her cheek. Yes. I watched her carefully. Those are not punishments. They're boundaries. I know. Do you? She took a breath. I'm learning that boundaries are not rejection. They're the conditions that make a relationship safe. This time, I knew the words probably came from therapy, but that did not make them less true. Emily reached into her purse slowly. I brought something. My body tensed before I could stop it. She noticed. Then she placed a sealed envelope on the table. It's not paperwork. What is it? A list. I opened it. Inside was a handwritten record of every account transfer, loan, and payment she could remember. Some items were already known, others were not. At the bottom, she had written, "If I discover anything else, I will tell you immediately. No more hidden damage." I looked up. Why didn't you give this to Rebecca? I did. This is your copy. For the first time since the betrayal began, Emily had brought me information instead of hiding it. Thank you, I said. Her face crumpled, not because I had forgiven her, because gratitude from me had become something she no longer expected. We talked for almost 2 hours. Not about everything. Some wounds were still too raw. But we talked honestly. Before she left, Emily stood near the front door. May I ask you something? Yes. Do you hate me? The question struck deeper than I expected. No. She began crying. I continued before she misunderstood. But not hating you doesn't mean everything is repaired. I know. I love you. Her shoulders shook. I love you too. I held her gaze. And I am still angry. I understand. I may always be angry about parts of this. You have every right. That answer mattered. The old Emily would have defended herself. The woman standing before me accepted that my pain did not need her approval. I stepped closer. I forgive you. Her eyes widened. I raised my hand before she could speak. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting. It does not restore your access. It does not cancel the court order. It does not erase restitution. Emily nodded through her tears. I know. It means I refuse to let what you did poison the rest of my life. She covered her mouth. Then she whispered, Thank you. I did not hug her that day. I wasn't ready. But when she stepped onto the porch, I said, You may call me next Sunday. Her face softened. I'd like that. Our relationship rebuilt slowly after that. Short phone calls, coffee in public places. occasional Sunday visits. When I asked a question, she answered directly. When she didn't know, she said so. When I needed space, she gave it. Trust did not return like a light switching on. It returned like sunrise. Gradually, quietly, one narrow line at a time. 3 months later, Emily visited again. As she prepared to leave, she stopped beside me. "Would it be all right if I hugged you?" she asked. She did not assume. She asked. I opened my arms. The hug was careful at first. Then we both began crying. I did not hold the daughter I remembered. She did not hold the mother she had once taken for granted. We held each other as two imperfect women who finally understood that love could survive betrayal only when truth and boundaries were strong enough to carry it. A year after the day strangers walked through my living room, I woke before sunrise and made coffee in Robert's old blue mug. I had stopped saving it for special occasions. At 73, I understood that ordinary mornings were special enough. The house was quiet, but it no longer felt lonely. It felt peaceful. The family photographs were back where they belonged. My bank statements rested inside a locked drawer. A small notebook beside my computer contained passwords only I knew. Every month, I reviewed my accounts. Every document came directly to me. Every decision began with my voice. That morning, I opened the kitchen curtains and looked toward the backyard. Robert's roses had bloomed. For months after the legal battle, I had neglected them. Thomas eventually helped me repair the wooden borders around the garden, but I insisted on doing the planting myself. "You sure?" he asked. "My knees aren't what they used to be." He smiled. "Neither are mine." We spent an entire Saturday working in the soil. When the first roses opened, I stood beside them and cried. Not because they reminded me Robert was gone, because they reminded me his love had not disappeared with him. It remained in the home we built, in the habits he taught me, in the strength I found when I thought I had none left. That afternoon, Thomas and Caleb came for lunch. Margaret arrived carrying enough potato salad to feed an entire neighborhood. Emily came too. She knocked before entering. She always knocked now. I opened the door. "Hello, Mom." "Hello, sweetheart." The word came naturally. That surprised both of us. Emily smiled, but she did not rush to hug me. "May I come in?" "Yes." She stepped inside carrying a homemade apple pie. "I checked the ingredients twice." I raised an eyebrow. "You baked this?" "I did." "Should Thomas inspect it before we eat?" She laughed. The sound was careful at first, then it became genuine. A year earlier, laughter between us would have felt impossible. Now it felt earned. Our relationship was not what it had been before. It was more honest. Emily still had no access to my accounts. She still did not have a key. The restitution payments continued. Sometimes our conversations became uncomfortable. Sometimes I remembered the strangers in my bedroom and had to step away. When that happened, Emily did not tell me to move on. She simply said, "I understand." Then she gave me space. That was how trust returned. Not through promises, through repeated respect. During lunch, Thomas told stories about the homes he had renovated. Margaret teased him for working too much. Caleb showed us photographs of his daughters. Emily listened quietly as he explained how I had once helped his family. Finally, she looked at me. "You never told me that story." I barely remembered it. Thomas shook his head. "We remembered." He reached into his jacket and placed something on the table. It was the old photograph of Caleb wearing the winter coat. He had copied and framed it. Below the photograph was a small engraved plaque. "One act of kindness can return when hope is almost gone." My eyes filled with tears. "Thomas, you didn't need to do this?" "Yes, I did." He looked around my kitchen. I came here hoping to buy a house." His voice softened. "Instead, I found the woman who helped save my family." Emily lowered her eyes. Thomas noticed. He continued carefully. "And because I recognized her, she was able to save herself." I reached across the table and touched his hand. "You didn't just recognize my face? You recognized that I was afraid." He nodded. "Someone once noticed when my son needed help. I suppose I learned from the best." For a moment, none of us spoke. Then Margaret lifted her glass. "To Sylvia." I shook my head. "No." I looked around the table. "To people who pay attention." We raised our glasses. That simple toast carried the meaning of everything I had survived. The truth had not been hidden because there were no warning signs. It had been hidden because love made me explain them away. Thomas paid attention. Margaret paid attention. Rebecca paid attention. Eventually, I learned to pay attention to myself. After lunch, Emily helped clear the dishes. She did not open drawers without asking. She did not reorganize anything. She simply washed while I dried. The rhythm reminded me of years earlier when she was a teenager and Robert made us clean the kitchen after Sunday dinner. For several minutes, we worked in silence. Then Emily said, "I passed another financial counseling course." "That's good. My supervisor said I may be allowed to manage my accounts independently next year." "How do you feel about that?" "Nervous." I smiled. "Good." She looked surprised. "Good. A little nervousness can keep you careful." She nodded. "I wish I had learned that sooner." "So do I." The old Emily might have become defensive. This Emily accepted the truth. When the dishes were finished, she looked through the window at Robert's roses. "Dad would have hated what I did." I put down the towel. "Yes." She flinched. Then I continued. "But he would not have stopped loving you." Tears filled her eyes. "How can you know?" "Because I didn't." She covered her mouth. I stepped closer. Love is not the same as permission. It is not silence. It is not rescue from every consequence. I loved you when I took you to court. I loved you when I changed the locks. I loved you when I refused to give you another key. Her tears fell freely. And I love you now. She whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom." "I know." This time, the apology did not ask me to erase the past. It simply honored it. Before leaving, Emily stood on the porch beside me. Thomas and Margaret were already walking toward their cars. The late afternoon sun stretched across the lawn where the real estate sign had once stood. Emily looked toward the empty patch of grass. "Do you ever think about selling?" I followed her gaze. "Someday, perhaps." Her face tightened slightly. I smiled. "But if I do, it will be my decision." "Of course. And I may not tell you first." She laughed through her tears. "That seems fair." After everyone left, I walked through the house alone. The living room floor still carried faint scratches from Robert's old chair. The laundry room wall still held Emily's childhood height marks. The kitchen table still bore a tiny burn from our 20th anniversary dinner. For years, I believed those memories were what made the house mine. I was only partly right. A home is not yours because your name appears on a deed. It is yours because your dignity is safe there. Because your voice matters there. Because no one can decide your future while pretending it is for your own good. I stood beside Robert's photograph. "We kept it," I whispered. Then I corrected myself. I kept it. That distinction mattered. I had not been rescued like a helpless woman. I had been supported until I remembered how to stand. Thomas opened the first door. Margaret stayed beside me. Rebecca protected my rights. But in the end, I chose to ask questions. I chose to face the truth. I chose to stop confusing dependence with love. The greatest thing I recovered was not the house. It was myself. That evening, I sat on the porch as the sky turned gold. Children rode bicycles along the sidewalk. A neighbor watered her lawn. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked. Ordinary life continued. I thought about the woman I had been before the showing, trusting, grieving, afraid of becoming a burden. I did not hate her. She had loved deeply. She had simply forgotten that love should never require surrendering your own voice. I touched the key hanging around my neck. It opened my front door. No one else had a copy. For the first time, that did not feel lonely. It felt free. My daughter had once smiled while listing my house online. She believed the sale would solve everything. Instead, the first buyer recognized me. And in the months that followed, I learned to recognize myself again. There is a dangerous belief many parents carry into old age, that accepting help requires surrendering control. It does not. Love can help you pay bills, drive you to appointments, or understand technology. But healthy love does not hide documents, change passwords without permission, dismiss questions, or make decisions behind your back. Trust should never mean blindness. I blamed myself for signing papers without reading them. I blamed my age, my grief, and my loneliness. But shame would not protect me. Questions did. So ask what you are signing. Know where your money is. Keep copies of important documents. Make sure more than one trusted person understands your affairs. And when someone becomes angry because you ask reasonable questions, pay attention to that anger. I also learned that forgiveness and access are not the same thing. You can forgive someone without returning the keys. You can love them without giving them control. You can hope they change while still protecting yourself from who they have been. Boundaries are not cruelty. They are the doors through which safe love enters. Emily's desperation explained her choices, but it did not excuse them. She had to face consequences before healing became possible. I had to stop rescuing her before she could begin rebuilding herself. And I had to understand that protecting my dignity did not make me a bad mother. It made me a whole person. Perhaps the most beautiful lesson came from Thomas. Decades earlier, I helped his family during a difficult season and expected nothing in return. That kindness traveled through time and came back when I needed someone to see the truth. We rarely know how far one compassionate act will travel. So be kind. Stay alert. Listen when something inside you says a situation is wrong. Most importantly, never believe you are too old to reclaim your voice. Now, I would love to know your thoughts. Could you have forgiven Emily after everything she did? Or would the betrayal have been too deep? Please share your honest opinion in the comments and tell me where you are watching from and what time it is in your part of the world. If Sylvia's journey touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe for more emotional stories about family betrayal, justice, and healing.